Welcome to The Finance Files, a podcast hosted by myself, Whitney Coford, my best friend, Brittany Carter, and with occasional guests, including my dad, the Greg Coford.
We talk about all things finance, including investing, trading, economics, capital markets, and business management. Learn the investor mindset with us.
Just a quick disclaimer, this podcast is not investment advice. It is purely for entertainment purposes, so make sure to do your own research. And with that, we'll get going with Way Back Wednesday and our topic for this week, which is do your own research. So, Brit, why don't you take it away with a little history?
Okay, so you guys all laughed when I said this was juicy, but I actually feel like this is really like a juicy, like scandalous story that is highlighting. It's one of like the first examples that I found when looking up fake news, and it has to do with the Knights Templar and King Philip IV of France. So essentially the Knights Templar was originally developed as a group that defended pilgrims around Christian-occupied Jerusalem. But over time, they expanded their role. They had like a very elite military, and they were fighting against the Islamic rulers of Syria, North Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula. So that means that they basically got a super profitable business empire of land, and they were not really paying any taxes. So King Philip IV was like, hey, that would be nice to have all that money. So he essentially, like a year prior to the like big impetus, had been finding kind of disgruntled old Knights Templar and like essentially compiling a bunch of like supposed misdeeds, like crazy allegations, of like spitting on the cross, denying Christ, like kissing each other in homoerotic induction rituals, tortures, like all these crazy things, right? And he compiled all these together, and then they did a huge raid on Friday the 13th, 1307, where they said that these people, like all the Knights Templar, had been against France and just essentially dismantled the entire Knights Templar to take all their money and just like spread all these falsehoods. So I thought it was a interesting extreme example of fake news, and this is not a one and only case, and this isn't just an example of quote unquote someone you think of as bad. When I was actually doing research for something else, I started doing a weird deep dive on Benjamin Franklin, because I'm related to Benjamin Franklin, which I really wish I had known in elementary school, so I could have been like, oh yeah, Benjamin's my ancestor, but whatever. Never got to do that humble brag. But I've always thought of him
Till now.
till now. Now's my chance. I got
the world will know.
I know him. I'm related. But so I've always had such a positive view on Benjamin Franklin. And it was really funny to learn that he actually used to spread fake news. And it was to support the American cause, but it was fake news. So it was interesting as someone who I'd always grown up thinking had strong journalistic integrity and just like a smart American, like he absolutely would distribute certain propaganda that benefited American public interest. So it was really fascinating to me, because I think we always look at like fake news as, I think you can say it's like quote unquote bad, but it's funny when it's like do we justify that, right? In the sense that he helped the American cause, but
at what cost?
At what cost? Not the truth.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, that fake news is basically a tool that governments and individuals use in order to get what they want, right? So we kind of touched on yesterday talking about what's the motive. And like your Knights Templar example, it sounds like the motive was money. And that's probably the motive a lot of the time is money or power. But understanding what the motive is for the individuals who are doing the study or putting out the news, or who are behind the information, can be really indicative whether or not it's, one, whether it's going to be fake, and then two, whether it might be skewed.
Greg, are there any like way back in your heyday stories of crazy fake news or
Well, in my perception, fake news, and as it relates to the markets, is just a new name for fraud.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree. Yeah. Fake
So,
news equals fraud.
yeah. So if you're asking, was there fake news back in the day? There's been fraud, that goes on in the markets with regularity.
Give us a
People
juicy
do.
story, though. We're here for the dirt. Spill the
is
tea.
this like
So
Wednesday's story
a
time?
classic one was Enron. Okay.
Yeah, I even vaguely remember like growing up with the Enron case.
Yeah. So Enron held itself out as this great energy trader, and they would have people come to their headquarters in Texas, and they'd walk them past the trading room where people would be sitting in front of multiple screens, frantically on the multiple phones at the same time, and the trading room was fake. People were only yelling and screaming on the phones and staring at screens when somebody was there for a tour. And the total volume of transactions that Enron claimed to have been involved in was like off the chart relative to what went on in the marketplace. And when that got all exposed, then Enron ended up in bankruptcy, and upper level management, of course, all claimed they had no idea that any of this was going on. And
Yeah, that triggered I really loved reading about the Theranos case. And that was just a super, I think what was really striking to me, and we kind of talked about this yesterday about does the group like are they willing to face corrections or are they willing to like say things that are not in their best interest? The owner of Wall Street Journal, Murdoch, he actually had made I think $100 million investment into Theranos. So this was like actually a big blow, and they tried leveraging him to try and squash the story. But he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna let my team run with what but like I trust them. I trust their journalism process and ethics code. Like I'm gonna let them run with what they're gonna run with." And I think that's like that to me was such a strong and powerful testament to the Wall Street Journal as a reputable news source because the owner was actually at a disadvantage by exposing Theranos. And I mean, the level that, like, they were stalking people, they were threatening people, they were using government officials to try and stop this from happening. It was actually borderline terrifying how much they did to try and prevent the truth from being exposed.
I have a so since we're sharing stories, I have a friend who are you guys familiar with Nikola, the car company? So
yeah,
for those who are not, basically Nikola, they were aiming to make zero emission uh, trucks, like commercial transportation trucks. And the CEO in particular was making these claims that they had this cutting edge technology for hydrogen fuel cells, and that it was going to be more efficient than anything else that was available on the market, and all this stuff. And they put out a commercial that showed one of their trucks, and so of course the stock ran up. People were really excited, and my friend loved it, excited, right? This company's doing really well. I'm going to go work for them. Literally moved states in order to go work for Nikola. The week that my friend started at the company, it came out that all of it was fake. They had none of the technology they claimed to. The commercial they put out, the way that they produced it, it was literally the truck rolling down a hill, and then they just played it backwards so that it looked like it was driving forward. Like they had faked everything. And the CEO, and I believe, ended up getting indicted, and so it was bad. But we asked, I asked my friend, like, were there any signs? And he was like, well, in hindsight, there were some weird things. Like when we went and did the tour, there were hardly any employees in like the R&D section, which was weird for a company that was claiming to do a lot of R&D. So there were some red flags, but there was so much hype that he kind of brushed it under the rug. And so it's the kind of thing where, you know, you are only as good as the information you have, and if companies aren't putting out reputable information, like you're never going to be able to suss out the fraud on your own, right?
I think that's like such an amazing call out that you're highlighting there, Whitney, too, is who else is supportive of what this person is putting out? Because actually, like a lot of people mentioned, there were no major like health science VCs that backed Theranos because anyone that dug under the hood, Elizabeth Holmes, like she just like would shut them out kind of thing. The only people that really went with it were those that didn't have a fundamental understanding of science that weren't able to suss out the issues. So that's another thing where if you are kind of hearing certain facts or studies, like who is also supporting and backing those up, right? Is it people that are well trained in that specific discipline? Is it people that like have had an impartial view previously on these topics? I think when you're looking at investments too, like there's so many people on like, Twitter or like, oh, I made this doing this, but it's like, okay, they made that much in the past couple of years. How about over the past decade? Is this something that's worked over decades? Because, like, to act like something that worked for the past 3 years is going to work for the next three, much less your whole life, is actually like very short sighted, right?
Right. And we talked about that with trading, like trading courses or, I like if you're going to buy a book about, oh, here's the big trading secret. It's most of those, as soon as the information is out there, you no longer have an edge, right?
Well, and I would conjecture that it wasn't a real edge to begin with anyway.
Because,
Because anybody who really had a way to consistently make outsized returns in the market, why would you sell that?
right. Maybe you're retiring. You want to do it for the good of mankind.
Then why do you need money to sell it? Why don't you just post it on the internet?
Touche. Touche. Didn't you have a friend who asked you about a specific training course?
Yeah, he came to me one time and said that he was concerned because his career path, as he continued climbing the corporate ladder, was requiring more and more time, and he didn't like the small amounts of time he's able to devote to his family and his kids.
A fair
So as he
concern.
thought about this, he decided the best way to solve this was to become a currency trader and work from his home. But since he didn't really know anything about currencies, he'd of course done his research diligently, and he found a company who said they would teach him the secrets of FX trading on their very exclusive course that cost $8,000. And this is back when starter homes were $80,000. So this was a serious chunk of change.
Wow.
I mean, it would be equivalent today to probably 50 or $60,000. So anyway, he asked me what I thought, and I said, "Well, why would they sell this information for 8,000 bucks when they could make millions of dollars?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's a really good question. I'm going to go back and ask him that." So I talked to him again, and he said, "Yeah, I asked him that, and they said that they already had enough money, and they just wanted to share it with others." And I said, "Well, if they have enough money, why do they need your $8,000?" So needless to say, he never did sign up for the course. And so, probably one of the world's greatest currency traders was nipped in the bud by my inadvertent advice.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to what we were talking about. Use your own critical thinking. Ask, why is this, a good opportunity? Why is it not? What are they not telling me? What is their motivation? Clearly their motivation was to get $8,000, but what they were saying why they were doing it didn't align with that, right? Like there wasn't an alignment between,
Right.
oh, we just want to share this information, but it's going to cost you. Those
Well,
two
well,
things not in alignment.
Well, and I think too, you look at like what's the success rate, right? Like, because anyone from a pure just like probability standpoint, like it's probable that you're going to get a couple people that graduate out of that program that make a decent, like a nice little chunk of change at the beginning, and then they do a little testimonial. But of the entire group that pays for this course, how many actually, like, from a like probability standpoint, what's the probability you'll actually be successful, right?
Well, and honestly, even testimonials, I take those with a grain of salt. Like, I don't look really at 5 star and 1 star. I look at the 3 star. Like, that's where the truth is, because the 3 star is going to be like, here's the pros and the cons. It's middle of the road, but
Yeah.
Okay, and I need to expose, I know we're getting way on tape, I do need to expose this. Do not trust the reviews that are just on people's websites. Because, like, I'm telling you now, as someone who has worked for these companies, they will purposely let some of the lower ones go in so that it's obvious they're not filtering the reviews. They will take away any that are, like, very, like, scarring or bad.
you heard it
And they
here
will
first
review.
on the finance files.
Well, like I just don't think people fully know. They're like, no, there's some 3 star. I think I thought that before I started working in e-commerce. And I was like, no,
Right.
they absolutely delete other reviews. Honestly, one of the few places that's even somewhat reputable. Oh, Yelp, you can definitely just pay to like alter your reviews. I feel like Reddit is honestly one of the few places that's still somewhat safe for like
I would still
unbiased
take that with a grain
reviews.
of salt.
Yeah.
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 What was
No,
that,
what I
Greg?
was going to say is, I think one of the things, though, you've got to step back and look at is all the people that are on the Forbes 400 list who got their start by buying a trading course from somebody they found online. Oh, wait, there aren't any. Sorry.
Oh, I think that's a perfect closer.
Well, and I think that's like one of the frustrating things is, you want to find a get rich quick or an easy solution, right? I mean, your friend's assessment of, oh, I'd like to spend more time with my family, that's so valid. But if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Well, and I think too, to Greg's point with that is like if you want to achieve something, make sure that whoever you're like emulating has been there before and like it's somewhat replicable, right? Because if you have just there's always going to be that one-off person that makes it happen, but you have to really look, is this like a tried and true proven way over time that people have generated wealth? So,
Right. Okay. And just like one last thing that I feel like we need to address on Way Back Wednesday is Greg's t shirt, which says, for those who are just listening, Harvard, because not everyone can go to MIT. And I just wanted to call it out because Greg did not go to Harvard, he went to MIT.
I was
So
so
no fake
confused.
news here.
I was so confused when I saw him wearing the shirt, and then I eventually saw the bottom half, and I was like, oh, it all makes sense now.
Okay, but Dad, why do you have this t shirt?
Well, I had a business partner who went to Harvard, and we used to always tease each other about how, my joke was that he couldn't add, and his joke was that I couldn't write a coherent sentence. And so one time for his birthday, I had these shirts made and sent him one. And his immediate question was, "Well, did you have one made that says the opposite, MIT, because not everybody can go to Harvard?" And I'm like, "No, that's your job."
Well, I guess you came up with one coherent sentence, and that is Harvard, because not everyone can go to MIT. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this Way Back Wednesday. And tomorrow we're going to talk about how to think like an investor and really do your own research. Have a good day.